For most air passengers, turbulence during a flight is a relatively minor, though unpleasant, inconvenience. But on Tuesday, things got much more serious, and tragically so, on board a Singapore Airlines flight from London to Singapore, as it encountered severe turbulence over Myanmar. A 73-year-old passenger from Britain actually died as a result of a suspected heart attack during that episode. The plane dropped about 2,000 metres in just 5 minutes, and anyone who wasn't strapped in was sort of thrown about the aircraft. One passenger, Andrew Davis from London, managed to fasten his seatbelt just in time.
Literally, I think as soon as I put it on, just a sudden thud and the aircraft dropping. The thing that really stays in my mind is just seeing possessions and cushions and plates just flying up. But when it stopped, everybody was very shaken. I mean, it sounds crazy to say it now, but I did go through my mind, is this fatal? Is this going down? And unfortunately, the gentleman did lose his life, which was sitting literally on the road behind me.
Well, one question that's been sparked by this are more instances of air turbulence occurring now because of climate change? Paul Williams is Professor of Atmospheric Science at the University of Reading here in the UK, and he told the BBC that his research suggests they are.
I set out about a decade ago to study this. Initially, we were running computer simulations of the future, and they were showing that as the jet stream evolved in response to the changing temperatures, they were indicating a doubling or a trebling in some parts of the world in the amount of severe turbulence. And then most recently, we've actually analysed historic data and found that those increases have already begun. So in fact, there's been a 55% increase today in the amount of severe turbulence over the North Atlantic, for example, compared to 40 years ago. So we began with this prediction for the future from computer models, and subsequently that prediction has been shown to be true. We do see that turbulence has already started to increase, and the link to climate change is really quite clear.
Well, let's get the perspective of the cabin crew now. These are the people whose responsibility it is to ensure the safety of passengers during flights. AllyMurphy worked as a flight attendant for 14 years. She's now a writer specialising in the travel industry, and she hosts the Red Eye podcast about air travel. She's on the line. Ally, thanks for coming on. I mean, how much of a worry was this story for you this week?
What was really strange for me is because I had an episode of my podcast last week which talked about my experience with severe turbulence, which happened in the early 2000s, where I hit the ceiling on my way to Australia. And at the time, luckily, most passengers had their seatbelts on, but the crew were severely injured, and it ended up with 7 of the cabin crew going up to hospital, and some with severe injuries. So it was an incredible coincidence that happened. And I think it also highlighted that the passengers who don't have their seatbelts on are more likely to be injured during clear air turbulence.
Yeah, it's really scary, isn't it? Let me bring in Marco and Verashni with us for the whole programme. Marco, ever had anything like this happen to you?
No, luckily enough, no. I think, I was listening, the segment as well, the interviews. Yeah, those who suffered severe concussions were also people who didn't wear the seatbelt, but also people walking down the aisle on the way to the bathroom or to stretch their legs. So, and this is a common sight for anyone traveling, long distance. So, is there any way those injuries could have been prevented in a case of sudden turbulence? Is there any thinking about, behavior within on the airplane, especially on long distance?
Ally?
Yeah, I think nowadays people tend to ignore the seatbelt signs. I think that people have become complacent to the cabin crew and the pilot's warnings. I always keep my seatbelt loosely fastened, mainly because of my experiences in the air throughout the flights. Obviously, you can't help if you need to get up to go to the bathroom, you need to stretch your legs. Of course, you need to be out of your seatbelt at that time. But if you're sat down in your seat and not doing anything other than sitting down in your seat, then please keep your seatbelt loosely fastened, because if a patch of clear air turbulence hits, you don't want to be the one that doesn't have something to restrain yourself.
I think we all need to think about it, don't we, Verashni?
Absolutely. And I think the point about complacency really does apply, because we are seeing, these kind of incidents happening across the world. They still happen. We, of course, remember what happened with Boeing. So as passengers, we need to stop being complacent and thinking everything's going to magically be okay and learn to listen to the instructions.
Ali, I mean, I just wondered how much of an anomaly this was. It sounds as if your situation was possibly quite similar, but this dropping of around 2,000 metres in just 5 minutes, that does seem a long way.
It is, and it is quite a rare occurrence. After this incident this week, I had a lot of people contact me due to just having a similar experience myself. And I asked them, people who are still currently flying frequently now, are you seeing an increase in this happening in the sky? And for the most part, people are saying no, it's not happening much more often. I think nowadays, there are huge technological advancements in forecasting, detecting turbulence. Also, the pilot and the flight crew training is getting better at a great rate. So overall, I think we're safer. But the biggest takeaway from it is that you are much safer if you have your seatbelt fastened than if you don't have your seatbelt fastened. So we might be seeing more reports from this, but it might be because reporting is better as standard. But why take that chance if there's no reason for your seatbelt to be off? There's nobody on that flight that got injured who had their seatbelt on.
Do you think this will change your habits, Verashni?
Absolutely. I have to say, listening to this interview, it does drive home the point for me that we have to be more careful. I do keep my seatbelt fastened loosely. It's very uncomfortable, especially because you have to do it over your blanket so that the air hostesses don't have to wake you up when those seatbelt lights go off. So I really appreciate this interview to drive home that point. The fact that no one got injured or was wearing a seatbelt is incredible. We really have to take that to heart.
Yeah, Ali, very briefly, I mean, did this put you off flying, your own experience?
Not at all. And in fact, yesterday I had to fly across the United States and we had moderate turbulence throughout the flight. But I did notice that people were ignoring the seatbelt signs, even after having heard on the news that there was a flight where people suffered. And people with children. And that's what kind of blows my mind, is if you have a young infant and you're letting them get up when the seatbelt sign is on for a reason.
Well, fasten your seatbelts, anyone listening. AllyMurphy, thanks so much for joining us there. Do stay with us. Lots more to come from Marco and Verashni after the news.